I always believed that being a good neighbor meant respecting people's privacy and offering a hand when it was truly needed. Unfortunately, Marjorie Kensington, the president of our HOA, lived by a very different creed. In her mind, being a good neighbor meant obsessively enforcing every trivial rule from the 37-page HOA handbook, a document she'd personally revised and expanded no fewer than 3 times since seizing the role 4 years earlier. I bought my house in Oakwood Estates about a year and a half ago, drawn in by the clean, orderly streets and stable property values. The realtor casually mentioned the presence of a homeowners association, but assured me they were fair, reasonable folks, simply interested in keeping up appearances. That might have been true before Marjorie's regime began. During my first week, I received a welcome basket from the HOA. Inside, alongside a few token snacks, was a laminated copy of the rulebook, 3 blank violation slips to fill out if I spotted infractions, and a handwritten note from Marjorie herself, urging me to attend the next monthly meeting. Out of curiosity, I went. I quickly regretted it. For 2 mind-numbing hours, I sat through Marjorie scrutinizing grass height violations, measured to the 1/4 inch, and debating which exact shade of beige was appropriate for window trim. I stayed off her radar for almost a year by quietly following the major rules and skillfully sidestepping her increasingly intrusive suggestions about my yard. That changed when a delivery truck wrecked my old mailbox, and I replaced it. No sooner had the new one gone in than Marjorie materialized in my driveway, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me?" she began in that nasal tone she reserved for public scoldings. "That mailbox does not comply with Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our community guidelines. All mailboxes must receive prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee." I had already checked the rulebook before purchasing it and found no mention of specific designs, only a requirement for them to be in good condition. When I pointed this out, Marjorie's expression tightened as though she'd just sucked on a lemon. "That's the old version," she replied coldly. "The committee approved updated standards last month. You should have received an email." I hadn't received any such thing. When I asked to see these new guidelines, she promised to send them immediately. 3 days later, a hefty 15-page document arrived in my mailbox. It dictated absurdly precise requirements for mailbox size, material, color, and even the style of reflective house numbers. My new mailbox broke at least 6 of these newly invented standards. I started asking questions. Digging through records and chatting with longtime residents revealed that the Architectural Review Committee had never voted on these changes. Marjorie had unilaterally drafted them and begun enforcing them as if they were binding. At the next HOA meeting, I raised the issue. Marjorie dismissed my concerns with a wave. "The committee gave verbal approval pending formal documentation," she insisted. "The standards are active, regardless of paperwork delays." Other homeowners chimed in with their own frustrations, but Marjorie skillfully dodged the debate, pushing it onto the agenda for next month. I left, irritated, but determined. 2 weeks later, a notice appeared taped to my front door. My mailbox was officially non-compliant, and I'd be fined $5 per day until it was replaced. The document was signed by the entire architectural committee, though a friendly committee member later confided that Marjorie told them I'd already agreed to the swap and just needed a nudge. That was the last straw. I filed a formal appeal and sent copies to every HOA board member, citing bylaws that required a proper vote and notification process for new regulations. This seemed to finally rattle Marjorie. The very next morning, she showed up at my door flanked by two uneasy board members. "We've reviewed your appeal," she began in a falsely polite tone, "and determined that since the mailbox stands on HOA common property, we can enforce conformity without a formal vote. Your appeal is denied." I kept my composure. "I'll be consulting an attorney regarding that interpretation." The flicker in Marjorie's eye betrayed her surprise. "That seems like an overreaction for a simple aesthetic matter," she snapped. "We're just trying to maintain property values." "I appreciate the concern," I replied evenly, "but I believe in following proper procedure. I'll replace the mailbox if the standards are properly approved." The two board members shifted awkwardly. Dave, a retired accountant who rarely spoke up, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should review the approval process at the next meeting," he suggested. The glare Marjorie sent his way could have cracked stone. She left with a clipped, "We'll be in touch." A few days later, I left for a 4-day business trip across the country. My security system, which alerts my phone to any motion detected around the property, had never given me reason for worry. Until then. Mid-presentation, my phone buzzed with a security alert. I discreetly checked it and was floored to see Marjorie, accompanied by two unfamiliar men, removing my mailbox. I quickly called Robert, a neighbor who'd agreed to keep an eye on the place. "Hey, Robert, someone's tampering with my mailbox right now. Can you check it out?" "I actually see them from my window," he replied. I watched through the live feed as Robert approached them. Even without sound, it was clear Marjorie was gesturing dramatically with her ever-present rule book. Robert, bless him, didn't back down. He whipped out his phone, presumably to call the police, while Marjorie shoved the document into his hands. He scanned it, shook his head, and kept his phone raised. What Marjorie didn't know was that my security system would notify local police if motion sensors were tripped while I was away and unresponsive. When one of the men began digging around the post, the system triggered. Minutes later, I received a call from the police department. An officer explained they had responded to an alarm and found people claiming to be from the HOA removing my mailbox. "I haven't authorized anyone to touch my property," I confirmed. "Would you like to press charges for vandalism and trespassing?" After months of bullying, the answer was clear. "Yes, officer, I have video proof." By the time I returned home 2 days later, Robert had reinstalled my original mailbox and saved the approved one as evidence. I also found several increasingly desperate voicemails from Marjorie. The first demanded an immediate callback. The second threatened legal action for allegedly involving police in an official HOA function. The third, left at 1 a.m., was an incoherent rant about her humiliation and how I didn't know who I was dealing with. My lawyer gathered the security footage, documentation of the improper procedures, and police reports. A cease and desist letter went out to both Marjorie and the HOA board, citing multiple violations of state law and HOA bylaws. An emergency HOA meeting was called, drawing a record crowd. Dozens of homeowners arrived, armed with their own stories of Marjorie's petty tyranny. The board members, now staring down legal exposure, rapidly distanced themselves from her. Marjorie entered last, head high, accompanied by a pale, sweating attorney. She marched to the front, only to be informed that she'd been temporarily removed pending investigation and would not be chairing the meeting. "This is absurd," she sputtered. "Everything I've done was for this community. That mailbox was an eyesore." Dave calmly addressed her. "We reviewed the documentation. Those standards were never officially approved, and tampering with someone's property is illegal. HOA rules don't override state law." My lawyer presented the footage and paperwork. The evidence was damning. When Marjorie attempted to interrupt, her own lawyer laid a hand on her arm, shaking his head. The board voted unanimously to remove Marjorie permanently, hold her personally liable for legal expenses incurred, and require a formal apology to me and other targeted residents. Marjorie's face cycled from furious red to ghostly pale. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. "I've given 4 years of my life to this place. I raised property values by 15%. Words seemed to fail her as the room sat in charged silence. Gathering her belongings, with her flustered lawyer assisting, she paused at the door. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice shaking. "This neighborhood will collapse without proper oversight. And you," she hissed, pointing at me. "You've made a powerful enemy today." With that, she exited, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and a neighborhood freed from her petty dictatorship.